Chocolate. It's one of the most familiar foods on earth. We eat it in candy bars. We melt it into cakes. We drink it on cold winter nights. For many of us, chocolate means comfort. But chocolate didn't begin as a sweet treat. For most of its history, chocolate was bitter. It was sacred. It was powerful. And at times, it was worth more than gold. The chocolate we know today is the result of 4,000 years of history, stretching from ancient rainforests to global industries. And it begins with a tree. Chocolate comes from the cacao tree. Its scientific name is Theobroma cacao, and it translates to something remarkable: food of the gods. Cacao trees are incredibly sensitive. They only grow within about 20 degrees of the equator. Too much sun, they struggle. Too little rain, they wither. But when the conditions are balanced, the tree produces bright pods filled with seeds. Those seeds are cacao beans, and when they are fermented, roasted, and ground, they become chocolate. But thousands of years ago, no one was making chocolate bars. The first people to unlock cacao's secret lived in Mesoamerica, a region that includes part of modern-day Mexico and Central America. The earliest evidence of cacao use dates back to around 1500 BCE, among a civilization called Olmecs. They lived along the Gulf Coast of what is now Mexico. We don't know exactly how they prepared cacao, but traces of cacao compounds have been found inside ancient pottery, which suggests people already were turning cacao into a drink. And that drink would become deeply embedded in the cultures that followed, especially among the Maya. For the Maya, cacao was more than food, it was ceremony. Maya art and inscriptions showed cacao being served during royal feasts, weddings, and religious rituals. But the drink they made wasn't sweet. It was thick, bitter, and sometimes spicy. Cacao beans were ground into a paste, mixed with water, and poured repeatedly between vessels to create foam. This foam was prized. It was considered the most luxurious part of the drink. Sometimes the mixture included chili peppers, maize, or honey. And cacao was so culturally important that it even appeared in Maya mythology. One legend says the gods discovered cacao inside a sacred mountain and gave it to humanity. Archaeologists have even found cacao residues in pottery buried inside royal tombs, meaning cacao may have been considered something that followed people into the afterlife. But cacao's role would grow even bigger under the next great civilization of the region, the Aztecs. By the 1400s, the Aztec Empire dominated central Mexico, and cacao had become one of the most valuable commodities in their society. In fact, cacao beans began to be used as currency. Historical records show that everyday goods could be priced in cacao. Because cacao trees didn't grow well in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the empire had to import beans through trade and tribute. That scarcity made cacao extremely valuable. The Aztecs prepared a drink called zocolatl, cold, bitter, and often flavored with spices or flowers. And like the Maya, they valued the frothy foam on top. One of the most famous drinkers of cacao was the Aztec ruler Moctezuma II. Spanish accounts describe cacao being served to him in ornate cups during royal banquets. Exactly how much he drank is debated, but what is clear is that cacao had become a symbol of status, wealth, and power. And soon, Europe would discover it. In 1519, Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés arrived in the Aztec Empire. There, they encountered cacao for the first time. At first, Europeans didn't quite know what to make of it. The drink was bitter, spicy, very different from sweet flavors Europeans preferred. But someone eventually had an idea: add sugar, and chocolate transformed. By the 1600s, chocolate had become fashionable in European courts. Spanish nobles drank it, then French aristocrats, then the English elite. Across Europe, chocolate houses began appearing in major cities, places where wealthy customers gathered to drink hot chocolate and talk politics. For the first time, chocolate was becoming a global commodity. But meeting Europe also meant that chocolate was entering the world of colonial empires, and that would change chocolate forever. As chocolate demand grew in Europe, plantations began spreading across colonial territories. In places like Brazil, Venezuela, and the Caribbean, these plantations required enormous labor, and much of that labor came from the transatlantic slave trade. Cacao joined sugar, coffee, and tobacco as part of the plantation economies that shaped the Atlantic world. This meant the growing popularity of chocolate in Europe was closely tied to the system of colonialism and forced labor. By the 1800s, chocolate consumption was expanding rapidly. But till then, chocolate was consumed as a drink. But this was about to change. The transformation of chocolate happened during the Industrial Revolution. In 1828, a Dutch chemist named Coenraad van Houten invented a press that separated cocoa butter from cocoa solids. Cocoa, by the way, means dried and fermented cacao seeds. This made chocolate smoother and easier to process. Soon chocolate makers began recombining cocoa butter, cocoa powder, and sugar. In 1847, a British company called Fry & Sons produced the first modern chocolate bar. In 1875, a Swiss chocolatier, Daniel Peter, mixed chocolate with condensed milk. Milk chocolate was born. And a few years later, Rodolphe Lindt invented a process called conching, which made chocolate silky and smooth. By the 1900s, major international brands were producing chocolate at massive scale and in huge quantities. Chocolate was no longer reserved for the royalty. It had become a treat for everyone. Soldiers carried chocolate rations during war. Children bought candy bars with pocket change, and chocolate spread to nearly every corner of the world. But the cacao tree still grows in the same narrow band around the equator where this story began. Today, about 70% of the world's cacao comes from West Africa, especially Ivory Coast and Ghana. Millions of small farmers depend on cacao farming for their livelihoods, but the industry continues to face challenges: low farmer incomes, environmental pressures, and ongoing debates on fair trade and child labor. Chocolate may be sweet, but its history is complex. From ancient jungle rituals to imperial trade routes to industrial factories, chocolate has traveled an extraordinary path. It began as a bitter ceremonial drink in Mesoamerica, but it became a global commodity shaped by empire. And today, it's one of the most beloved foods on earth. So the next time you unwrap a piece of chocolate, please appreciate the fact that it's not a simple dessert. You're holding 4,000 years of complex history in your hands. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and please consider subscribing. And please do leave a comment. I want to understand what kind of video you want to view. I will be proceeding along those lines. So far, this is my second video. My first video hasn't got a single like yet. Please consider watching that as well. You might enjoy it. Thank you.